This video is going to walk you through step by step how to 3D model a simple object. This particular object is going to be a can. Think of like a soda can. We're not going to do the top part. We're just going to focus kind of on the body of the can. So this kind of a shape. So let's get started. First, we're going to make the primitive that is as close as to our final shape as possible, and that is going to be our cylinder. So I'm going to create my cylinder, and then I'm going to go over to the attribute editor so that I can make sure that my starting shape is as close as in size as possible. We do not want to use the scale tool to scale things up. It is a better workflow instead to try to actually type in our numbers so that we know exactly the size that we're creating. So if we think of like a soda can, that's about, let's say, 10 centimeters tall. So let's change the height to 10. Yeah, 10 should work. If we're off by a little bit, that's fine. We're just mostly getting it as close as we can. If I was creating this for real for a game, I most likely would do some research first and find out what the exact dimensions of a can is. Radius, 1 centimeter is a little bit too small. Let's try radius of 4. Let's see. It's a little bit much. Let's drop it down to 3. And that's looking closer to a soda can. So next, I do want to change the subdivision axes. I want to add a little bit more just to make this a little bit rounder. So I'm going to just bump this up to maybe a 24. I do like to keep these in powers of 4. It makes my life easier in down the road with doing unwrapping and stuff like that. It's just kind of a good habit to get into of whenever you're making a round or cylindrical object. Try to keep the subdivision axes on those a power of 4. All right, so we have our basic shape. Next, I do want to move the pivot point to the bottom center of our object. Since we are building this as a game object, it's also going to, it's a good practice just to make sure that it is set up correctly. To change our pivot point, I'm going to get the move tool. And then I am going to come over to our modeling toolkit. I'm going to make sure I'm at the object level. And I'm going to come down here to where it says edit pivot. I'm going to click edit pivot. And then you can see that it activates it. We know that it's activated because the gizmo does change. So off, on, off, on. When we are in our viewport then, if we want to snap it right to that bottom, the easiest way to do this is going to be to hold down the V key. Notice that it does change the look of this again. This means we are doing a vertex snap. We are lucky that when we're working with a cylindrical shape, we have that vertice right there for us to snap to. In other instances, if we don't have a vertex we can snap to, we might have to do a grid snap where we position our object on the grid, and then we use the X key to snap it to our grid. But we're lucky we don't need to do that for this one. So we're going to set that there and then turn edit pivot off. Now we can position this back at the origin, and we have our can just about ready to start. Let's make sure that this is cleaned up. So I'm going to first rename this to can. I'm then going to make sure I freeze my transform, and I'm going to delete my history. So now we do finally have a can primitive ready to start 3D modeling. Try to get into the habit of doing this kind of process whenever you start a new model so that you have a clean, nice primitive to start with. So if we take a look at that reference image of maybe this one, we can see that, it's not just a straight cylinder. It does have some shape to it. So I'm going to first maybe work on the bottom of it, of how this looks. And what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add some extra edge loops in here so that we can shape this. So this is flat, but it does start to curve in. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to use the insert edge loop tool to insert some extra ones. The other method you can use to make more edge loops is we could select all of our edges all the way around and do a connect, but that's not as organic as I need to because it is very rigid on where it places it. Yeah, we can slide it up and down, but that might not be the best method for this one. So instead, I'm going to go underneath Mesh Tools and use Insert Edge Loop. And the way that we use this is we choose which edge we want to connect to. So I'm going to click here and I can click and drag and place this. So I'm going to first click one, and that is going to be for this edge right here. I'm then going to make another one for this inner edge down here. So I'm going to click maybe right about there. Okay, that's all I need for now. This is going, we don't want to go too far. We want to kind of get it closer in shape, and then we can refine it if we need to. So now what I'm going to do is I do need to scale in this row of faces. So we don't really want to scale in this edge because if we do, we're going to get kind of like more of like an hourglass shape, and that's not what we want. We don't want to do this one and then have to come in here and like eyeball scale this. I guess we could, but I kind of want to do this a little bit cleaner. So instead what we're going to do is select all the faces around and then scale those in. So I'm going to get my face select. I'm going to hit the Q key to turn it to the selection tool. I'm going to click one of these faces. I'm then going to hold Shift and then double click the face next to it. And this will select the whole ring of polygons for us so we don't have to click around. I'm then going to switch to my scale tool, and I'm not extruding, so I want to be very clear. This is not an extrude. We're just moving these faces in and out. So I don't want to move them on all of them because it's going to scale them kind of weird on like other axes possibly. I want to be very mindful and make sure I'm only doing this on the X and the Z. So I'm going to hover over this little square, click and drag, and scale this in. And then we have that nice bottom shape. So we go back, we have that. I'll go back and do a little bit of refining later, but for our purposes right now, this shape is perfectly fine, but we'll take a couple extra steps at the end to maybe smooth it out a little bit. So next I need to work on this top. So we know that we're going to need a cut here, an extra edge loop, and then another extra edge loop here, very similar to the bottom. So let me go ahead and put those in. So that is, again, just underneath Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. I'm going to add that first one. And then I'm going to add that second one. Very similar to how we did down there. That's a very similar kind of shape where it kind of tapers in and then it's flat, tapers in, and it's sort of flat. We'll talk about that top in a second. But we can go about the same process to start getting it closer, where I am going to select just this ring of faces by getting my select tool, clicking one, holding Shift, double clicking the next one. I can then use that scale tool to shape this inwards. You see that? And it's pretty close, like it's pretty close in this shape. We can refine the top a little bit because if you notice, a lot of these soda cans might have that little bit of lip kind of bumping out. You see that? So what we can do is I'm going to go ahead and, if I accidentally deselected this ring, I can always reselect it again. I'm going to get my scale tool. And this time, if I hold Shift, see how it changes this to an extrude? I'm going to click and drag just a little bit and release it. It's a little bit thick though, so watch this. Before I deselect it, I'm not holding Shift. I don't want to extrude again. I don't need more polygons. I'm going to grab the scale tool right here and just scale it down just a little bit. And we can get like that nicer sort of edge to it. Don't worry about this look. We're going to come back to like that weird crisp edge in a little bit, and I'll show you how to fix that. The next thing I do want to do is I want to give it a bit of a top. You know, soda cans don't look like this. They do tend to have a little bit of an insert, like down like that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We can't use the insert edge loop here. This isn't going to work because I do need to, you know, make a new shape. I don't want to extrude like these faces down. It's not quite thick enough. I want to give it a little bit more, so I do need an extra edge loop all the way around. But if I try to do my insert edge loop on this, it's not going to work because this goes to a point. We have all of these tries, so an insert edge loop will not work when we have a whole bunch of triangles going to a single point. What we can do though is we can use our connect. This would be a good time to use that since we can't use the other tool that we would prefer. So we can't, unfortunately, we can't do our click, double click. We can see that it doesn't work quite correctly. You know, this isn't really the best shape, but for a beginner modeler, we're not going to worry about it for now. Instead, we just need to select all of these. We could go in and individually select all of these. This is a method, but it's kind of tedious. We can't quite do a click and drag. If we do that, we can see that we're also selecting the bottom, and that's not what we want to do. We want to be very mindful that we're not accidentally selecting edges that we don't mean to. So what we can do instead to help us is underneath our modeling toolkit over here, we can turn on camera-based selection. So if we switch this to on, what it does is when we're selecting things, it's only going to select the things that the camera can currently see. So if I click and drag now, it's only going to select those top ones and not the bottom ones because they're not visible to this viewport camera. So that's a lot quicker. Don't forget that this camera-based selection is on. There are going to be instances where you don't want it on and you might forget to turn it off. So, excuse me, sorry. Make sure that you don't forget you left this on. So I'm going to turn it off so I don't mess up later steps. Now that we have these all selected, we can go to our connect. And we can see that the connect does work. That's not really where I want it. I do want to use my slide to slide it up and down. And I never remember which way to do this. So 0.8 is the wrong way. Let's try 0.1. Maybe 0.05. And that should work for me. Putting that extra in. I'm going to turn off connect. And now I can do my extrude of these faces. So I'm going to grab all these, and again, can't really do a double click like we were doing for the ring because it's technically not a ring. So if I want to select them all quickly, I probably do want to turn my camera-based selection on. Select those, and quickly turn this back off. And yeah, okay, good. We did not select things we didn't mean to. I'm then going to change to my move tool and hold down shift so that I can extrude this down. And I want to be very careful. If I mess up, let's say I do this and I accidentally, I removed my finger from the mouse. I need to make sure I'm also removing my finger from the shift key because I don't want to accidentally extrude again. If I say, oh no, that's too not far enough, but I'm still holding the shift key and I do it again, I'm actually extruding another time, and you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. You see that Z fighting there? Because I was doing too many extrudes. So I need to be careful about how I'm doing my fingers on here. So hold shift, click and drag. Immediately when I'm done, I need to, let go of the mouse, let go of that shift key so I don't do an extrude I don't mean to do. And let's look at that. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. Let's look back at our reference. And that seems to be good enough. We could go in and add that extra little bevel in there, like that extra little inset. But this is just meant to be a simple model, so this is going to be perfectly fine for me. So let's finish up then with the bottom, because Coke or soda can bottoms don't quite look like that. They do tend to have a little bit, let's see if I can find a good reference. Let's see, soda can bottom. They do tend to have that little bit of kind of like a roundish kind of indent to them. So why don't we do that too? That's not going to be too hard. So I'm going to rotate to the bottom, and I do need to do a very similar insert. I got to insert my edge loop, but again, I can't do that down here because they do go to that pole. So let's get our edge select, turn camera base selection on, and I'm going to click and drag, select those, and double check I did not select things I did not mean to select, and I'll do a connect. See, this one goes the opposite way, so I probably want something closer to like a 0.95, and that looks good. I hit enter, and I am going to turn off my connect. So let's do our extrude. It's going to be very similar to the top. So I'm going to get my face select. My camera base selection is still on, so I can easily click and drag. And I only got those bottom faces. So I'm going to then hold Shift, and I'm going to pull up to extrude, being very careful. And we kind of have the start of the bottom now. It is not round though, so let's kind of work on that. There's a couple different ways that we could make this round. Let's do it this way. So I'm going to grab this vertex, and I'm going to pull it up a little bit. And it's going to make it sort of round. It's going to be a little bit too pointy though for my tastes. So once we kind of have it kind of domed a little bit like that, we're going to insert another edge loop into here. So again, since this is a pointed one, I do have to get my edge select. Camera base selection is on. Click and drag, and do a connect. I do want to connect this right in the middle. So I'm going to change that back to 0.5. Then I can get my move tool, and I can kind of bump this up a little bit to shape it a little bit nicer. If it's kind of hard to see what's going on, we could go to our wireframe mode and go to our side. Well, let's go to the side view and go to wireframe. And we can kind of make this look a little bit more domey, and that's probably good enough. Let's go back. I'm just clicking up here. So this is wireframe mode, and then this is smooth shade all, and we just want to smooth shade all. So those, they might be kind of hard to see, but they're right up here at the top. Wireframe, smooth shade. And that's pretty good for the bottom now. So we're not quite done. I do want to fix a couple issues. The first one being this faceted look on here. The reason it did this is because when we do extrudes, it usually by default sets edges to be hard, where we will see very specifically where all those edges are, rather than a soft edge like here, where this is, set to soft, and we get that nice smooth look. So let's kind of take a few minutes to fix this. It will dramatically change how polished this looks. So I have to kind of think about how I want to do this. I do need to kind of grab all of these. It might be a good practice for selection to do this. So I'm going to first fix this edge. So I need to grab all of these. So the good news is, since this is an actual ring, I can, with my select tool, click on one, hold shift, double click the other, and it will ring select all the way around. To switch this now to a soft edge, I'm just going to go underneath mesh display and choose soften edge. If I needed to do it the opposite way and make a soft edge hard, I could always choose harden edge, but I want to make this soft. So let's do soften edge and take a look. There you go. In fact, I use these so much, I put them on my custom shelf. You can see some of these tools. Insert edge loop. I have merge, which I haven't shown. Merge to center, which I didn't show in this one. Fill hole is also one I use often, but you can see I have harden edge and soften edge on my custom shelf because it really helps out. So let's fix this ring too. These are a little bit hard. So I'm gonna double click to select the loop. Same thing with this one and this one. And let's do a soften. That looks pretty nice. Let's check down here. Oh yeah, we can see these. So let's soften these. So click, double click, soften. There we go. So this particular edge here looks really hard. It's not quite matching up to the original, but we don't want to just soften it. It's going to look really strange. We never really want to soften edges that are like a 90 degree like that because it ends up looking really weird. Instead though, let's add just a little bit of definition to this by using our bevel tool. So I'm going to double click this edge to select it. Since it is a nice ring, this is why we want good topology, we will double click to select, and our bevel tool is right here. I don't need it to be super large like this. I'm going to probably drop it down to maybe like a 0.2 just to kind of smooth out that edge. The one thing though is usually bevels do leave you with that hard edge on them. So you see that? It's not quite nice yet. I will have to come in, select these, double click, soften, double click to select the loop and soften it. And just that little bit kind of helped it look a little bit nicer. And we have our completed can. So big takeaways. Camera-based selection can be super useful in selecting things from the top and bottom. Build things slowly. I didn't do all my bevels and inserting a bunch of edge loops all at once. I kind of, worked up to it and I just added a few at a time to see how they look. And then afterwards, I went in and took some time to make sure that my hardened and softened edges looks correct. So hopefully this is helpful for you with some of the work you have to do this week, and try it out for yourself.